Hey, welcome everyone. In this video, in which I'll be covering the story of Infamous Second Son and how I find that some elements of the story and the script are just poorly written. It's hard to believe that there was a team of professional writers behind this game. Now, don't get me wrong, I do love this game. In fact, I have reviewed it. A link to the video review can be found in the video description. In that review, you'll see that I gave it a pretty high score because it's a rock solid game. But keep in mind, in that review, there are no spoilers. But in this video you're watching right now, it does contain heavy spoilers. I just made this video for fun because I noticed that no one really on the internet covers too much about the weird items about the story and how it's poorly written. Just for fun, I just, giving my food for thought. And if you're not sure what I'm talking about, well, from this point onward, you've been warned that there are heavy spoilers, even including some elements from the ending. So with that said, this is your last chance to, go back from this video. But yeah, we're covering items such as this.
I am a bioterrorist! I eat children and kittens!
But even items that are worse than that. So at the beginning of the game, we get a quick recap that anyone who has powers within this fantasy world is considered a conduit, also known as a bioterrorist. That's because in the past, some conduits had abused their powers and caused mass destruction, so in fear, the government has created the DUP, basically a military division that arrests anyone with powers and automatically deems as bioterrorist, even if they've done nothing wrong. So there's a transportation truck containing some bioterrorists that is going to crash, but before the crash takes place, we're introduced to Delsin, the main character. Now he's a local delinquent of the town, and ironically his brother is a local sheriff of the town, so his brother Reggie is always arresting Delsin and they're always fighting and arguing. And as they're fighting, that military truck containing some bioterrorists crashes. Two bioterrorists escape, so the brother Reggie, the sheriff, chases after them. And of course, Delsin notices that a third prisoner is trapped and tries to rescue him, but by touching him, he absorbs his powers. Delsin didn't know he had the ability to absorb powers up until this point. The bioterrorist that had the powers escapes. Delsin then wakes up and is now teleporting all over the place because he can't control his powers. He hears his brother Reggie screaming for help and blasts the car away. Now, automatically at this point, Delsin, it would be automatically considered a bioterrorist. There's a deep sympathetic moment here in which Reggie shows how much he cares and loves Delsin, and no matter what happens, he won't let him be considered a bioterrorist and let him get arrested and all that stuff. Except immediately after that, Reggie tells Delsin, hey, let's go chase the bioterrorist that escaped. And Delsin, being the idiot that he is, doesn't even tell his brother, hey, I just almost accidentally teleported off a cliff because I can't control these powers, and that car almost exploded and would have probably killed you by accident. Maybe it's best I go home because then otherwise if I get caught, I'll be considered a bioterrorist. But nope, instead they both go and chase after the bioterrorist that has now escaped to a local fishery warehouse. So a few seconds later, the brothers, Dumb and Dumber, go over to a local fishery warehouse in which the bioterrorist has escaped to, but there's a crowd gathered around. Now they can't figure out how to open the gate because the gate padlock has been blasted by the bioterrorist. So instead of Reggie being the local sheriff waving his badge around to tell everyone, hey, escape to safety while you have the chance as a bioterrorist in the fishery, they both make the unwise decision to let Delsin teleport through the fence, which immediately scares everyone and they run off deeming Delsin a bioterrorist. So after that, Reggie tries to calm the crowd down, ironically. But if you think about it a little bit more, earlier in the game, Delsin is a delinquent and he climbed into the fishery illegally. So why couldn't he climb the fence illegally again? Why does he have to teleport through the fence? There's another mistake here that doesn't make any sense. So Delsin chases after the bioterrorist, they run outside the warehouse only to run into the DUP as well as the head of the DUP who has concrete powers. Now here's some things that doesn't make any sense to me. She uses her concrete powers on the bioterrorist who's a smoke guy. He controls smoke and can turn into smoke and teleport. Yet she's able to capture him with the power of concrete. Couldn't he just teleport through it or something? That doesn't make any sense. Then she goes on and says one of the stupidest things in the entire game.
You seem nervous.
No, I'm not nervous.
It's been my experience there are only two reasons for people to be nervous. Either they're cowards, or they have something to hide.
And the main character, being the dummy that he is, also has a rebuttal in one of the most ridiculous ways.
We are engaged in a life and death war with these bioterrorists, and it's my job to do whatever it takes to ensure that we win that war.
What? It's kind of funny because aren't you a bioterrorist too?
The dialogue here is just written poorly. If the DUP commander just goes on her rant and says all this stuff, Delsin should have said, hey, I'm actually scared because, this warehouse is on fire. There's a bioterrorist inside. I was trying to save Betty, that old lady that you have behind you that's being treated like a prisoner, even though she's completely innocent. And oh, by the way, when I run out of the warehouse, I see you and your two goons with massive machine guns, so all of this is pretty scary to me. But no, instead, the dialogue just makes absolutely no sense here. Now at this point, the DUP commander makes concrete grow out of Delsin's leg. Now that's important because I want you to remember that, as I'm going to be mentioning it way later in this video. Skipping on ahead, several events happen. I'm not going to really recap them too much because it's not a recap video. And then we find that, Delsin is chasing after another bioterrorist with laser powers, and he finds his first corpse murdered, hung upside down by laser powers, and instead of being disgusted, he just makes jokes about the corpse, such as,
Okay, sending you the picture, but I think he blinked.
Now you might not think this is a big deal, but there's a karma system in which you can be a good guy or a bad guy. Now even when you play as a good guy, it's bizarre that Delsin still makes fun of the corpse that's been murdered, hung upside down by laser powers. He kind of sounds like a sociopath. What's the point of being a good guy if he's going to sound like a maniac anyway? Fast forwarding a little bit later on in the game, Delsin and his brother Reggie come up with an idea on how to capture one of the bioterrorists, spread out throughout Seattle. So in order to do so, Reggie runs around like a crazy person claiming to be a bioterrorist in the most ridiculous way.
Flee in terror, mortals! I could melt your faces with nothing more than my pinky!
And cops wet the bed.
Now I get that the writers are trying to be funny with this, but this might be funny for, 8-year-olds, 12-year-olds, but it's just so over the top. It's just trying so hard. It just seemed a bit ridiculous at that point. Shifting a little bit fast forward in the game, Delsin eventually does meet the Smoke bioterrorist, the one he originally absorbed his powers from at the very beginning of the game. And he does find his actions very bizarre because he seems to know things he shouldn't. So of course, Delsin is rather suspicious. Is he actually going to be helping Delsin, or is he actually on the side of the DUP? He says specific things about how even Delsin is able to upgrade his powers, things he should not know. And Delsin just kind of asks like, hey man, how do you know all this stuff? But Delsin gets ignored, and Delsin, being the idiot that he is, just follows along and he gets led into a trap. It just seems like the main character is just a complete oblivious fool to everything that's happening around him. I get he's supposed to be a delinquent, with the graffiti and all that, but this guy has no common sense. It's just kind of baffling to me as to why they made him this thick. Reggie ends up dying as he's betrayed by the Smoke bioterrorist. It turns out the whole thing was a sham and a trap, and Delsin rightfully wants revenge on the Smoke bioterrorist. So when he catches up with him, he starts to choke him with a chain. It doesn't matter if you're good or bad in the karma system throughout playing this game, this will happen no matter what. What I found very strange about this part is that the Smoke bioterrorist will not teleport through the chains. Now you might be thinking, how is that possible? He's being choked to death. Now it has been shown throughout the game that interlocking metal, such as a fence, is no problem. The Smoke bioterrorist and Delsin can teleport through them no problem. So what's the difference between interlocking metal, which is just a chain around his neck? There shouldn't be. So the Smoke bioterrorist getting killed, potentially, if you choose to be a bad guy, in this method makes no sense. It doesn't matter if you end the game as a good or bad guy. At the end of the game, they'll recap Augustine, the head of the DOP's master plan, and how she let the Smoke bioterrorist, a paperclip, to purposely escape from their cargo transportation truck so that the 3 bioterrorists can wreak havoc on the town of Seattle, and she can come in and swoop and save everybody and show that the DUP are a godsend. Except what if that didn't happen? What if the 3 bioterrorists didn't wreak havoc on Seattle? What if they just ran away and just, fled into the bushes and the woods and disappeared forever? She would have looked like a complete failure, and that would have worked in the complete opposite direction of her plan. It just seems rather bizarre that they made this her grand scheme. They would have been better off not mentioning this part at all, and the bioterrorists simply just escaped on their own. That would have made just perfect sense on its own. Remember how earlier in this video I mentioned it's very important to remember that Augustine can grow concrete out of people's bones? Now at the ending of the game, whether good or bad, Delsin does the same thing. He grows concrete out of Augustine's limbs, which makes no sense because she controls that power. So couldn't she nullify that and prevent concrete from growing out of her own bones? Why does she allow that to happen? That doesn't make any sense. I don't get it. And lastly is the evil ending. Now I know a lot of people like this ending. Basically, the people of his hometown, the Akamish, basically still have concrete growing out of their legs and limbs and whatever, and they're gonna die without Delsin taking it out with his powers. Because of all the murdering he did and all the killing he did, they chose to, die instead, not accept his help and tell him to go away. Then he throws up a tantrum and just blows them all up. It made no sense. Like, seriously, he did the entire thing in the video game to save the people, then all of a sudden he gets in a tantrum, in a split second blows them up? It was just lazy. Like, seriously, who wrote this? What would have been more poetic and ironic of an ending for the bad side is if Delsin had cured everyone, took the concrete out of their bones, they would have lived, all would have survived. Except he becomes overprotective of his people to the point where he's almost like a dictator. They can do nothing without him, acknowledging or approving things. and he assigns other conduits to protect them. What I'm trying to get at is that Delsin still could have been the guy you loved to hate, but he still would have had the power of authority, which is what he hated from his brother because his brother was always arresting him, and he'd be abusing his superpowers to, torment people, which is what Augustine did. He would have had the two elements he hated from Augustine and his brother wrapped into a single package in himself. But instead, nope, the writers are just like, let's just blow everyone up and call it a day, and that's done. Roll credits. Now, this kind of seemed like a rant video, and actually, you know what? It was. I was disappointed at how some of these elements are written so poorly because this is a rock-solid video game. I love this video game, despite all these shortcomings and what seems like common sense, terrible writing. But I just wanted to share my thoughts with everyone else. So with that said, I do hope you enjoyed this video. You can find a written version of this video. A link to my website will be in the video description, as well as my social links. Be sure to hit the like button, subscribe, and thanks for watching.